about, Dad?
God's name.
What is God's name?
Howard.
How do you know? How do you know God's name is Howard?
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I don't know his last name.
Is it Wisner?
Huh?
What is God's name?
Howard.
Who?
Howard.
Howard? How do you know his name is Howard?
Because
Because what?
our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Who?
Hallowed be thy name.
Howard be thy name?
Hallowed be thy name.
Shalom, Ka'ala Yahweh Ba'Shem Yashai, Ba'Shem Rukah Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who are the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about these videos we just watched. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because even though these are pretty funny videos, it kind of highlights how the actual name of God is hidden from many people and for many reasons, right? The guy in the beginning of this video, he was an old man, right? Or should I say older man. And he really, at his age, should know what God's name is. But I'm guessing he's probably an Edomite, right? He could be an Irish, right? But the whole thing about him not knowing what God's actual name is at his age is not how it's supposed to be. But in this wicked kingdom that's run by the Satan and his people, the Edomites, which is the biblical name of the Caucasian race, this world is upside down. Now again, the man in the beginning of the video, he just doesn't know it because either through not caring enough or because he's been purposely miseducated on what God's name is. And as for this Israelite girl here, she's just a little kid, so this is really more of a dig on her parents than anything, right? If that was her mom, it's really not that funny, right? Because the mom should be teaching the kid what God's name is. Well, let me just cut to the chase. God's true name in the Hebrew tongue, which is the language that God speaks, it is Yahweh, okay? Yahweh is Hebrew for He is, and His Son's name, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. In Hebrew, Jesus' true name is Yahweh Shai, right, which is Hebrew for He is salvation. Also, Yahweh Shai translated into English is actually Joshua. This is why people say Jesus and Joshua have the same name. And I know it doesn't make any sense when you think about it, but that's because Satan and his people have done a mighty work in trying to bury the Messiah's name and God's name. But I'm going to go ahead and go through, and we're going to first of all debunk that God's name is Howard, and we're going to go through some other names, and I'm going to explain how you could find God's name and how we really need to start teaching our people this, because this is the key, right? This is the key that leads you onto the path of salvation. But let's get started. This is Matthew 15:8. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So you see that? We just seen two examples of people honoring the Lord with their lips, right? By knowing God, what they believe is God's name. But see, here's the thing about God's name. Learning what God's true name is a sign that you actually care enough about Him and you love Him enough that you'll actually search out what His real name is. Now, like I said again, the man in the beginning, it may have been for his lack of sincerity, and he may not really be that into the Lord. And the girl, she was just a kid. So again, she just simply wasn't taught. But again, this system has taken away God's name on purpose. And instead, they've given you false substitutions in the hopes that you won't gain that salvation that is right there for us in the Bible. And when I say us, I'm talking about the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to the Israelite bloodline. This is Acts 4:12. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given amongst men whereby we must be saved. Okay? This is why it's so important that you know God's name and the Messiah's name. Okay? And that's because those are the keys that are going to get you on the road to salvation. This is the reason why at churches they always say Jesus Christ. This is why you have groups like ISUPK and other groups that won't actually go into Yahweh Shai or give you the name of Yahweh, and that's because they've been paid off, right? This is why in the Bible the Pharisees even told the disciples not to use the name Yahweh Shai. Here, let's read this. This, by the way, is the prayer, which is the only prayer ever given in the Bible that the Messiah told us how to pray. It's Matthew 6:9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, this word here, it's not Howard, it's hallowed. Now, let's go ahead and find out what this word actually means, okay? When you go down, hallowed be, right? G37.
Strong's G37, hagiadzo. Hagiadzo.
Okay? It says to render or acknowledge or to be venerable or hallowed. To separate from profane things and dedicate to God. Consecrate things to God. But this is pretty much what it means, okay? To render or acknowledge or to be venerable or hallowed. Okay? So that's what that means in that prayer, okay? So the Lord's name is not Howard. Now, what is or where can you find God's name? Well, actually it's Exodus 3:15, right? Because right here God calls himself I am, but right here he tells Moses in 15, he says moreover. Basically, this is the name, and it's right here, the Lord. See, these devils, they took God's name out of the Bible, right? And they substituted it with the Lord, all caps. Now, I'm using this blue page because this is the Blue Letter Bible page, and from this page you could actually see the original language behind the English here. Okay, so if I wanted to see how the original language broke this down, you could simply click on Tools, and you go to the Interlinear tool. There's a bunch of different tools here, dictionaries, commentaries, but I just really use the Interlinear, and this is what was taught to us by the apostles. Okay, so this is how we learned this. So you go here, this is the original Hebrew, and that's God's name there, okay? And you would know this once you start learning God's name, right? And it goes from right to left. But let's go down, right? Because when you go into the Interlinear, it shows you every word, and we got to look for the Lord, right? Here it is, the Lord, H3068, H simply meaning Hebrew. The New Testament says G, even though, like the apostle said, the New Testament was written in Hebrew, but it was later translated to Greek because the majority of the Israelites that stayed in Jerusalem spoke Greek, since it was about 300 plus years of being under Greekish rule. Okay, so that being said, this is how you would find out, God's name. Okay, so you go here. You click on the actual word and it takes you to the words page. Now, in this case here, this is another level of trickery that the devil puts in place. First of all, this is God's name, but you see these little dots? This is what's known as Yiddish. And to find out what Yiddish is, let's go to the Bible timeline. Because you got to understand where it comes from to understand why it's not good. So all those Israelites out there saying, Yahuwah, or let's actually hear it. Let's actually hear it.
Strong's H3068, Yehovah, Yehovah.
See, that's actually Yiddish pronunciation. And these little dots, it indicate that you got to use certain vowels on these words, and hence you get the E, and it's just the wrong pronunciation. It's basically Germanic language, but that was hidden in our original alphabet. But again, this is why I said we need to bring out the history. So when you go into Amalek, right, the so-called Jewish people, when they were known as the Khazars, after they had started to come out of the Caucasus Mountains, they settled at the base of the Caucasus Mountains, and they became known as the Khazarian people. Eventually, the Khazarian people converted to a religion that they made themselves that was based off of the true heritage of the Israelites, which by that time, for the most part, were lost in the world, right? They had amalgamated. The southern kingdom had basically been scattered. Same thing with the northern kingdom. Well, when Amalek, or these Edomites, right, which were calling themselves at the time the Khazars, converted, first it was the nobility, then later on all the people did go through it. This happened in 740 AD, right? They were Khazarian Jews, but later on they were destroyed. But the point being is, after they converted in 740 AD, which there are records, their own people discussed the mass conversion, and it's all proven, but it's hidden from general public's knowledge. But it's coming out now because this is the time when the truth comes out on these devils. Well, a little under 100 years later, they had to bring their language, which was Germanic, because again, remember, these people were Edomites, and they had, came into the Caucasus Mountains, and they had their own language, right? What it tells you here, it says, Yiddish was created to help hide the Germanic language of the Khazars in the Hebrew alphabet. Dots and dashes are ways to spot Yiddish today. So you can see here, all these little red dots, that is Yiddish. So though you may be seeing Hebrew, when you include the dots, that's Yiddish. That being said, you got the original Hebrew alphabet, okay, and its pronunciation. So in here, the very top part here, this is the original Paleo Hebrew, okay? This is the alphabet and the language that Moses used, okay? And that King Solomon, and basically the older, Old Testament was this, okay? What happened is, after the Northern Kingdom went into captivity, about 700 BC, about 100 years later, the Assyrians, not only did they take our land, they took also our language, but what they did is they modified it, and they wrote their own language, or own alphabet, because remember, they were our captives, and basically they were our masters, or at least the Northern Kingdom. This is why this type of Hebrew is referred to as the Assyrian Hebrew. It's also referred to as the Aramaic Hebrew, okay? Because our captors at that time, the Northern Kingdom that is, they wrote their own characters, but for our language, so that way we would learn these. The top is the language of Moses. It's a language of the Old Testament, and it's our true language, right? The Bible tells you that we would be speaking in the Holy Tongue, which is Hebrew, okay? The Holy Tongue is Lashon Kodash, okay? And that's another name for this language. Now, again, the way it works is it goes from right to left. So it's A, Ba, Ga, Da, Ha, Wa, Za, Ka, Ta, Ya, Ka, and so on. Now, for God's name, let's take this and let's look at these characters here, okay? Or notice it's Assyrian, so you got to go to the Assyrian. This little character, it is right here, right? So that's Ya. This character, that's the Ha. This character, it's Wa, and then back to Ha. So Ya, Ha, Wa. Okay? So that's how you pronounce God's name. You got to go to the original Hebrew character or alphabet or language to pronounce it. And why is all this important? Okay? Why do we care so much about God's name, right? Because isn't there that popular saying in the world, God has many names? That is not in the Bible. That saying has been put out into the world by these devils, okay? Because who is the God that has many names? That is Satan. If you're not worshiping the one true God of the Bible, then any other fake God that you may think may be sincerity thinking or whatever. It could be Jesus, Jehovah, Vishnu, Buddha, all these different names, Allah, and all these different titles. You're not worshiping the one true God, right? The God of the Bible. But that's okay for the majority of the world. But for the Israelites, who are predominantly the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline, it is literally your job to have only one God. Okay, that's why we were created. This is why the Lord chose us, because He has a special gift for us, and that gift is heaven. Right? Heaven literally is the rulership of the immortal, universal empire. The Israelites will be ruling jointly with the Messiah, Yahweh Shai. But this has only been allotted to a particular group of people, that being the Israelites. And the Israelites that will make it first round there have to know what? What did Acts say? There's only one name that we must call upon under the sun, which is the earth, where we must be saved. Saved from what? From the coming destruction. Okay? Which is going to destroy all the Israelites, the 2/3 of Israel that don't make it because they didn't get the name or they were rejected. What does this say? This is Psalms 91:14. Because He hath set His love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because why? Because He hath known my name. So you see, there you go. This is why it's very important to have God's name. Okay? And like I said again, that's the thing about God's name. It's such a small and easy thing to do, to find God's name, but it does require a little bit of work. And it's not that much, especially for what you get as a reward. That's that you start getting the mystery and the understanding of the Bible. And again, remember, that is the true baptism. It's not being dunked in dirty water. Okay? The true baptism of the Bible is of hearing God's words, which are in the Bible, and understanding them, right? That's the baptism by fire. Okay, that's what you're here watching these videos for. And again, on top of that, one of the most important things is that you know God's name. Now, this is why I'll ask people, do you know, once you learn God's name, people say, oh yeah, I know God's name, blah, blah, Yahweh, Yahweh Shai. Can you write it? Right? If you can't, you should start learning to just write God's name. And it's really easy to do, and especially if you have like this graph here. You can pause the video, or I'll put the link in the descriptions if you want to download it. Right? But it's really simple. This is Proverbs 30:4. Who hath ascended up into heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fist, or hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is His name, and what is His Son's name, if thou canst tell? So it's not going to be as easy as just going to a Bible, looking up what it says there, and reading the Lord or Jesus. Because remember, these are decoys and lies that have been set up to deceive you. Real quick, let's just go through some of the more important dates and explanations, right? So one thing, the Messiah's name and the Most High's name cannot start with the letter J. And that's because the letter J didn't come into existence until 1524. Okay, and it wasn't really used till later on, right? Wasn't even used in the 1611 King James Bible. It wasn't that popular. Well, this man tells you here, Gian Giorgio Trissino, an Italian Renaissance grammarian known as the father of the letter J, made a clear distinction between I and J. Okay? And again, the Lord's name wasn't used all the way until officially in 1632. Right? It tells you here, it says, the first time the name Jesus was spelled precisely in this way in a secular sense was first noted June of 1632 within an English legal brief prepared from the court of the High Commission in London, England. Okay? And so there you go. When you call upon Jesus, right, and all these other different names, right, Jehovah for the Most High, you're basing that name off of lies. And before Jesus, by the way, when the Vatican got set up, it ultimately set up the ecumenical councils, okay, to basically rewrite and establish the church doctrine, basically what Christianity and Catholicism, and for the most part, all like God-believing Western religions are learning today. We're set here. This is where, right, the Council of Nicaea, Laodicea, Lateran, and Trent. These were all the places where they decided all these horrible things like the rosary beads, the mass, how mass would work, and all stuff. Well, they also decided that Yahweh Shai's name would be changed to where it would say there Yahweh Shai, it would say Iesus, and that's the name that stood there until they changed it to Jesus in the 1600s. So again, you got to know this, right? So this way you could have those keys to salvation, right? You could call upon the Lord, right? What does it tell you here? John 11:25. Yahweh Shai saith unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? To believe in the Lord, you got to know what his name is. You may say you love Jesus, you love the Lord, but if you don't know his name, you really haven't shown that you cared enough to find it out. Okay, and this is why the Lord is making sure to put his name out in such a clear manner, right? The elder Kazak, right? He makes beautiful videos breaking down the Lord's name, right? And a lot of my understanding comes from, right, that elder's teaching. So let's read this and let's get out of here. This is Romans 10:13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's why it counts. And that's why we get on IUIC for not teaching in the name of Yahweh Shai or Yahweh. You see, they're trying to take that away from you. Right? They're trying to do the same thing that the world did to you when you lost your power. And again, it's easy to do, and it's the most simplest way you can show the Lord that you really love him. Because why? Let's read this again. Because he hath set his love upon me. See, because if you cared enough about the Lord to look into these matters, what would you do? Because he hath known my name. And that's it, Akim. So hopefully this video was edifying. Until next time, I want to give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rakakwadash. Shalom.